For this practice, you are going to need paraffin, gloves, various size molds, your forceps, and your cassettes. We also sometimes use plastic molds as well as the metal molds. Turn on the cold plate to your embedding center. At this time, you're also going to make sure that the temperature of your paraffin is where it's supposed to be. 61 degrees is where ours is set. You also want to ensure that your paraffin chamber is full of paraffin. Place your empty cassettes in the paraffin reservoir in numerical order. Carefully open one cassette at a time, maintaining the specimen integrity. Choose the appropriate size mold, keeping aware of your size restrictions of the tissue. Place a small amount of paraffin in your mold. Orient your tissue correctly in the mold, being certain all tissue is on one plane parallel to the bottom of the mold. For example, your tissue may need to be on edge, on end, or the epithelium may need to be facing all in the same direction. Allow the hot paraffin to cool only long enough to anchor the tissue in place. Place your cassette top over the mold and completely fill with paraffin. Set the combined mold and cassette onto the cold plate neatly and in order. Immediate and rapid solidification of the paraffin block is desired in order to facilitate sectioning and to prevent the tendency to form large crystals in the wax. When the paraffin is sufficiently solidified, remove the block from the mold. Clean your block of excess paraffin without compromising the patient information on the block, and place in order in a box.
Blocks and use it to start facing these blocks that I just embedded. So I've got the knife clamp released. I'm going to put this old block in and I'm going to face some of these blocks here with our newly embedded samples. I like to face them always the same way, but it depends. Once in a while I get the sample, I think I have it embedded the correct way, and every once in a while it gets turned. These samples, sometimes it's hard to see. So I'm going to face these blocks. I back it off, so I want to make sure I don't chunk these, because you want to be very careful to not face through your area of interest. Now, the way I embedded them, that sample should be pretty close to the surface, so I face in. And then I like to kind of take a look at my ribbon and just see if I'm at that area of interest yet and if I've got the full surface. So sometimes I'll face into it a little ways and then I'll put it over on the water bath and just kind of take a look. And I see, it's hard for you to see in the camera, but I do see a full line of my sample. In the case of these epidermal equivalents, it's better to make sure you have the whole line. I don't know if the reflection, if you're able to see that, but there's a whole line of my sample. And you'll be able to see that closer with your own eyes, probably rather than the camera. But I feel like I'm faced into that one enough. I might give it a couple more turns just to give myself a nice flat, smooth surface. Again, it's better to underface the block and be able to go back to it than cut through your area of interest. So I'm facing slightly. Now I want to check my ribbon. I don't want to go past my area of interest. If this were a skin lesion, I might not even do a rock facing. I might even, if this had been a real human sample skin lesion, I might even slowly microtome in and just get that initial surface. I might not even actually do a full facing. Now, when it wants to stick like that at the top, that may mean, and I have to take a look at that, that that may be one sample that I misjudged and have to turn my block around if it's going to continue sticking. Now I can see with my eye that I've got the full surface, maybe this one little corner end I don't have yet. And that's why it's important to embed evenly, because I could be cutting this part of the sample first before I get to this part. So it's critical to embed it evenly and get that flat at that angle in that boat when you're embedding. Now I can see that this block is giving me a little bit of trouble with the sticking. So I'm going to try a different part of my knife blade and see if that helps. If that doesn't help, I may actually have to turn this block around to the other side to make sure that my sample is embedded embedded the way I thought it was. And it looks like just moving that block over solved my problem. Moving the blade over solved my problem. Okay, it seems like, you can even pick up if you're not sure and you're questioning whether you got your fur full level and your full epidermal area. You can even pick up these test ribbons and take a look under the microscope and just kind of give a quick peek and see if you actually see it and you're in the area you want. It's absolutely better to not overface. So we'll continue facing. Be very careful when facing to approach it nice and evenly and carefully. I mean, speed is okay, but you don't want to go in so thickly. You're probably going in 10 or 15 microns at a time the way I face. But you want to approach it carefully. Now, some in a different setting, when we got to get rush surgicals out and we're just plowing away, that's one thing. But these are your precious publication samples, so there's no need to rush and hurry and try to trample these going so fast. Just take your time and face into them. Make sure you've got your area of interest. Like I said, these are just like test ribbons. They've got knife lines and everything else because this is an old, almost exhausted blade that we're just using for facing. I kind of have a better eye for it, so I don't always float a little test ribbon to see. But for your purposes, you may want to do that and give it a quick check under the microscope. So, moving right along. I'm going to wipe off my forceps. I don't want everything sticking. And sometimes that little test ribbon also gives you an idea if you need to adjust the screws or adjust this little lever. If the block wants to grab and chunk, if it just wants to grab it, that means something is loose somewhere. Maybe this got loose somehow. Maybe somebody loosened one of these, loosened this. Maybe the blade is loose. You forgot to clamp it. So if you ever get that happening, that's the problem. Something is loose. And that's what you need to check first. Again, you don't need to do the rocking. You can still face and do the full turn. That's your prerogative. You can do it either way. I'm still facing now. Instead of rocking, I'm doing the full turn. I feel like I've gone in enough now. I'm going to try my little test ribbon and see how it does. If the sample is sticking and not giving you a ribbon, try turning the block the other way, like flipping it around, because maybe you embedded your sample with the area of interest up, and then it wants to start sticking on the top and not giving you a full ribbon. The other thing is you might try is a slight tilt back, or I mean very slight. A little goes a long, long way, or a very slight tilt forward. And sometimes that'll make your ribbon. The very easiest thing to try is turning your block, or moving to a different part of your knife blade and just moving this little clamp lever slightly. But then the next thing to try, if it's still not doing it, is doing that slight tilt back or slight tilt forward. But this is ribboning very nicely. And I can see that I've got the full face of that sample. I can see the nice full line of the sample in my ribbon. So I'll put that on the water to soak and chill. In the meantime, I'm going to go and write up my slides. Now, a lot of places do not like you to write up all your slides at once. They feel like it's better to write for each block as you're cutting it, and that saves you from making a mistake. For our purposes, I tend to write up all the slides while the blocks are soaking and stuff like that. I'll go and write up all my slides. You can use this KP Marker Plus. It'll make it through all the reagents, and it's a very nice, and you don't get pencil, like the carbonated pencil shavings into your sample if you use this. Or you can simply use a regular pencil, never use a Sharpie. Now I'm just gonna, I guess I'll do one block of actual cutting just to show them. Although the samples aren't soaked enough, but it won't hurt them. I'm going to label my slides. I usually like to label them, for your purposes, I'm going to label them right here, just for the camera purposes. I usually like to label them on a very clean, paraffin-free surface, so it just keeps them really nice. Yeah, and these are charge slides, absolutely. Use charge slides pretty much for everything in this lab that's going to be done. You use charge slides. The only time you do not use a charge slide is when you're doing laser cell capture. For laser cell capture, you must have uncharged, uncoated slides. So my first block, and I always like to keep things in numerical order again. That's been important for your samples to kind of see what the cells are, and going through, if you're looking at an area, going through that specific area and seeing what's going on with it and knowing where you're at. If you make a mistake on a number, like say I make a mistake and I see it's actually, if I write 107, I see it's actually 106, never go like this and try to change it. It's just not worth it. This slide is maybe 50 cents to $1. Just get rid of the slide, be done with it. Never try to cover over and rewrite a number. It's just, it looks bad, it makes you question yourself later. It's not worth it. Get rid of the slide. Don't erase it, don't do anything, get rid of it. And I put a little number 1 that lets me know that those are the very first sections. And these will be the second sections, or the second slide. And I'll pick things up in that order, in sequential order. I'll just do one more batch. Again, a lot of places do not like you to pre-label your slides. They only like you to label, like that 106 that I just did. I would cut block 106, it would match with those slides, and then I would write 107 for the next 107 block. For my purposes, and today we're writing them ahead of time. That gives our blocks a chance to soak also. I like to leave them soak a good at least 10 to 12 minutes or more. It doesn't seem to hurt our samples. Now other types of tissue would not be able to withstand that type of that long of a soaking. Now see this slide I just mislabeled, and I see that, so I'm going to get rid of it. Okay. Now I'm going to get us a fresh blade. This was a facing blade that I had used earlier. I'll use it to kind of clean off my microtome a little bit here. And I'm going to get rid of it in the sharps container. And let's start with a fresh blade and begin real microtoming. I'm going to brush off my area a little and get ready for this. Now again, I had that block facing this way when I put it in. I faced it facing this way, so I'm going to put it in facing that way. And it should give me a nice ribbon. It's got a little water on the front, so I might like dab that off. I saw that this is block 106. I'm going to make sure that my batch of slides is indeed 106. That matches with the block. We have what's called in histology the 2-second rule. That is, check your block, check your slide. It takes 2 seconds. And make sure you have not mixing up a sample. And you give it a nice, smooth, slower stroke and get yourself a nice ribbon. I wanted to stick on the block a little bit, so I think I'll just grab that and get it over to the water bath. I really like to have a little more control over the ribbon than I just did. But again, we have a little bit of a airflow problem in this area here. And I need to keep track of where my first section is, so I'm going to touch it to the edge slightly because I know that that was my first one. I don't want to lose track of the sequence of these, just because they're floating around everywhere. So I'll touch it to the edge so I know that this was my first one, and I want to pick them up in sequential order. So that way they're not floating around. And I see that this last one has a little bubbly, dry area, so I'm going to actually not pick up that one. I'm going to discard it, and the rest look fine and perfect. I don't know if the camera can pick up that little white speck on there, but that's an area that actually is a dry or bubbly effect on the tissue itself. And it will actually show up even worse under the microscope, and it's not worth trying to salvage. Now, a nice even stroke is what you want. to get your ribbon. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, I'm going to dip mine in the cold because I want to not have it stick to my ribbon. So I dipped it in the cold water just for a second. I know this was my first one. I want it nice and centered within the slide. I picked up 2. Now this one was kind of a lone one, but I don't want to waste it, so I'm going to get it, and then I'll add another one to it. And you really want to keep them orientated the same way on the slide. Pick them up the same way, kind of watch how they start to spin.